Welcome to the Artists Index. I'm Scott Bishop, your host for this episode. I'm a New Bedford-based singer, songwriter, and sound sculptor making music under the name Scapegoat. I also present the live concert series, Unexpected Music, which features South Coast musicians performing in non-traditional performing spaces around New Bedford. The In Focus podcasts are generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agency supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'd like to invite our guest to introduce himself, spell his name, and talk a little bit about what he does.
My name is John Fernandes, Johnfernandes, and I'm a singer-songwriter, guitar player in the area. Play solo. I play with Molly O'Leary, play with Jay Kelley. Also a guitar teacher in the area as well.
John, are you originally from the area?
Yes, I born and raised, grew up in New Bedford.
All right.
Yeah.
And when did you start getting interested in music?
I think music itself starts with my dad. When I was really young, he would play me his record collection, and maybe at first I didn't like it too much, but it was more of a just chance to hang out with him. But I saw how passionate he was about it. So at a young age, he'd play all his records, all the Beatles records, the Stones, Zeppelin. I have his collection now. It's incredible. So I would see how passionate he was about his music. And then one day he played me Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and that just like laid me out. That's where it kind of started, was with that album, and then all the rest of it kind of was like a domino effect from there. All the Floyd albums, Zeppelin. So that was just pure music. He didn't play an instrument or anything like that. But I always wanted to play guitar, but I didn't really start playing guitar till I was a senior in high school. So it happened a little bit later on, than some people when they're really young. And I started taking lessons with Tony Pacheco. I don't know if you know who that is.
No.
He had taught throughout the area for years, and when I took lessons with him, I'd go to his house. He was probably in his late 70s when I took lessons with him, and it was kind of cool because he'd call me before the lesson. And he'd be like, "Can you pick me up?" He had a raspy throat because he would chain smoke cigarettes. I'd pick up his prescription meds and a carton of cigarettes on the way to the lesson.
So you're his guitar student and personal assistant too.
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of got the basics with him, and then at that point I was like a senior high school, and then freshman in college. I was getting into like a lot of improv kind of music. I was into the Dead a lot and Fish, and slowly getting into jazz. So then I started taking lessons with Jim Robitaille, who's a huge influence on my musical journey. I took lessons with him for quite a while and learned just a ton from him. I don't know if you ever had a chance to see him play. He's a New Bedford guy as well.
No, I haven't.
Yeah. And but yeah, he was a major influence, and that's when I got really inspired to try to make this whole thing a career, or take it more seriously as well.
So you picked up guitar, relatively late, senior year. How did your style develop as you began the lessons with Tony, and then with Jim, and then moving up to now? Because you have a really just unique approach to guitar that I love, and I'm curious how that developed.
Yeah, I guess with Tony it was just the basics. Like, he would give me all the chords, he'd give me some songs to strum out. He would kind of creep a couple different styles in there, like anything from flamenco to folk. But I was getting into jazz a lot, like Miles Davis, and like I said, improvisational music. So that was right in Jim Robitaille's, in his alley. So I mean, I went to UMass too. I majored in music there as well. So a lot of that was, just like what you would think, a lot of theory, ear training, a lot of that stuff. So I was at that point heavily into improv and jazz. As far as over the past 20 years, as my style developed, I mean, when I was younger, I think I was I was trying to play a million miles an hour all the time, you know, as many notes as I could. But I think over the past, hopefully, 15 years, I've kind of toned that down a bit and try to play more musical. Whatever setting I'm in, try to play more towards what the song is, and color things up, whether it's my stuff or Molly stuff or Jay Kelley stuff or whoever. Just think more musical. Where when I was younger, I think I was always thinking more about the guitar first rather than the music end of things.
I think that comes out particularly when I see you with Molly, because it has the sense of like your guitar playing fits the song, the sounds fit the song, the parts you're playing, and there's never a showiness to it. Like it's really accomplished and brilliant, but it's not look at me.
Oh,
It's
thank you
this
so
is
much.
part of
That
the
means a
this is
lot.
part of absolutely, and it's organically part of the song in a way that's really lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot.
So, let's go to more on how the style developed. I mean, you talked about getting less showy. How did the tools of the trade come into play? Because, when I saw you play with Molly over at Hatch Street Studios a few weeks ago, you have these array of guitar pedals and you're a master at using them. And, I was wondering if you could talk about how that shapes your musical palette, and maybe how the guitars you play shape your musical palette.
Sure. Yeah, I guess we could start with the pedals. So I had a looper. I remember buying one a long time ago. I was like, oh, I can just use this no problem, and didn't realize that it actually takes. It's one of those pedals that it takes some effort and practice to kind of get the ins and outs and how you want to use it.
And can you describe for folks at home who may not be familiar, what does a looper pedal do?
A looper, I guess the basic function of a looper is you can play a chord sequence, and once you run through, you hit the pedal at the start of that chord sequence, and when it's over, you hit the pedal again, and it'll keep looping that over and over. But it just doesn't do that. I mean, you can do a million other things with it too. What I started doing with an experiment with it years ago was I would hit the loop pedal and not play anything, and then hit it again so it's in overdub mode, and then slowly swell notes in. So it keeps overdubbing and picking up what you're playing. So by the end of it, it's this huge wash of sound. I mean, it doesn't even sound like a guitar anymore. It can sound like a synthesizer or a keyboard. And what's cool about it, I mean, you're kind of improvising. You don't know what the end result's going to be till you get there. So I love doing that. So I'll do that at home a bunch, and a lot of compositional ideas will come out of that, just from the looper reacting to what I'm playing, and vice versa, me reacting to what the looper is doing as well. Um, I mean, delay pedal. That's always, for someone who doesn't know, a delay pedal is just you play a note and it can keep repeating that note. It can be fast, it can be long. So that combined with looping, I use a volume pedal as well. That's good for like swells. So if you have the volume off, you strike a note or a chord and bring it in, and it can almost sound like a bowing effect, or again like a keyboard effect. Oh God, I have a freeze pedal. That's like the same thing as a piano like sustainer, like on the pedal. You hold down the chord and it holds it out, but one for the guitar. So you can play a chord, step on that pedal, and that rings out. And you can play on top of that. Distortion pedals, I've always had those. So those are always in the mix as well, too.
And those things become compositional tools too, right? Because I was
Oh,
watching
yeah.
Artist Corner set for I think Swansea Cable Access, and you were playing one song. You said, "Yeah, this one started out as an improv tune because I needed to fill time at a gig, and it turned
Yep.
into something that you actually took home and developed." How do
Yeah.
those tools work? Like, how does a looper or delay or those things work when you're in composition mode?
Yeah. For the looper, I mean, if you already have like I'll use it like if I already written a chord progression. I'll put it in the loop pedal, even for coming up with lyrics and vocals. That way it just keeps looping and I can try to sing things over it and maybe think of other melodies to play on the guitar that maybe not necessarily the guitar has to play, like a second part. Maybe it could be that a bass line or another, a violin wants to play it, or a saxophone, so the pedal just keeps playing and playing. And you can try all these different ideas on top of it. It's a huge tool with infinite possibilities, whether it's for practice reasons or compositional reasons, or you play it, use it live for your performance. I mean, the technology's just come a long way. There's so many to choose from now. There's endless amounts of loop pedals and just pedals in general.
Some of them are, packing all kinds of different pedals in one box. And you
Yeah.
have this wealth of things that you can choose from, or even like some of them are just like mini musical computers. It's
Yeah.
absolutely mind blowing.
Yep.
Looking at songwriting, you're in the process of recording a solo record, yeah?
Yeah.
So how long has that been in progress? And maybe even going back further, how long have you been writing songs and developing that aspect of your musical life?
I mean, I've been writing music, I mean, since I've been playing, but I think it was always instrumental. I mean, I never sang until maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago is when I started being like, all right, I'm going to try to start singing. So I tried to learn a couple basic covers. So then I learned a few, and then I was like, well, let me see if I can start writing songs. I mean, I wrote throughout high school as far as words go. The first thing I wanted to be was a writer. I wrote poems and short stories and essays, and my first major at UMass was English until I switched to music. So I didn't write for a number of years as far as lyrics go or words. But then I started doing it like maybe 4 years ago, you know. And it was a different experience, but a really amazing experience, because the first song I wrote, where I wrote the words and the guitar, it felt like more complete than writing an instrumental piece. I don't know if that makes sense. It almost felt like there's the song, where the instrumental, when I write instrumental pieces, there's like the chords and the melody, but you can really have like this free way about it. But with like the song with words, it just felt more complete in a sense. It's an experience that I haven't felt with writing music. I don't know if anyone else has felt that way, or if you have felt that way if you write your own
Yeah,
lyrics as well.
I have, and my experience of it is usually if something is going to be an instrumental, it usually kind of slaps me in the face and says, this is an instrumental. But normally, I feel like I'm writing things that are calling for a vocal melody, which means it's also calling for lyrics, and it needs something.
Yeah.
And, that's the piece of the puzzle that, depending on the day, can be really easy to crack, or just really, like digging roads.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting that, you've really been a writer your whole life. Why do you think it took you so long to get to a point of saying, oh, lyrics and melody with music?
I guess I had no interest in singing, and like when I got into guitar, it was like all about the guitar. Like when I was in my late teens, 20s, I guess. So I mean, I wrote so much stuff throughout high school, and unfortunately I threw it all out. I wish
Oh,
yeah, it's one of those like, I wish I never did that. I mean, tons of notebooks. I mean, it would be a trip to go back and look at, and if I still had that now. I mean, I'm sure there's like tons of songs in there that would be cool, but that's what's done is done kind of
yeah.
thing. So that's fine. I mean, now I try to write. It comes in waves as far as words go. Some days I'll wake up and just try to write. I'll set the timer for 5 minutes and just do free writing. This will go on for maybe weeks at a time. Then I won't do it for a little bit. Then I'll do it again. Then I'll go back and read through it, and maybe there's a word or a phrase or a line that really pops out, and I'll write that down and maybe kind of elaborate more on that phrase, and that eventually could be the start to a song, or something, or maybe a chorus that I need somewhere, or a verse. So it's all this material, this source material that I have that I can go to.
And then from there, as you compose music, are you looking through those notes and saying, hey, these two lines might fit this. It might be a place I can jump off from?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like a springboard effect. Like, all right, this could be a song about this, or um, maybe that'll work with something I already have. You know.
It's interesting because there's so many different ways to write a song. Like for me, this sounds a bit like, in a way how U2 works, where they develop music and then Bono's got his notebook. Let's see if I've got something for that. REM was the same way.
Yep.
And yet other people like, a Dylan would be like, if I don't write the song and finish the lyrics in the first 15, 20 minutes, it might not be as good if I don't finish it in the first pass. It's just wild how many different ways you can write a song.
Yeah.
Have you ever read Jeff Tweedy's book, How to Write One Song?
Yeah, I have that book. It's a
That's
great book.
Yeah, and if you're interested in songwriting, it's a great book to read. And your free writing exercise reminds me of one of the things he would do, which is
Yeah.
basically take, a verb and, what kind of adverbs or adjectives could you apply to it? Just a
Yeah,
really
it's a great
fascinating approach
that book.
to lyric
Yeah.
writing. What can you tell us about the songs on your record, See It From Here?
Well, most of the tunes have to do with um my dad, and he had recently passed away this past August. But he had battled Alzheimer's for the past maybe 4 or 5 years. So a lot of the tunes are about him and coming to grips with that awful disease, and seeing someone you've known your whole life like slowly unwind and not be that person anymore. Um, and it kind of intertwines with when we first like kind of noticed it, and he got diagnosed for real. At that time I was drinking like a ton, so some of the subject matter is also about me not dealing with drinking, and also not drinking anymore. I haven't drank in almost 3 years, so that's good. So the two kind of intertwine throughout the album. So I don't know if it's a concept album, but there's definitely a theme there.
Yeah. I mean, it also seems like a key thing to write about because your dad was really like your first musical influence because of wanting
Yeah.
to be with him while I was listening to his records. How much does that come into the lyrics on the record or even the music?
Yeah, it definitely does. It was like I wrote the first song about him was called Marion by Accident, and then it just seemed like the next song, like it was like another one about him, and then another one about him. And they say to write about what you know, and in the moment, that's just what was coming out. And also like dealing with the drinking aspect that was coming out. So I was like, well, this is honest, and that's what I was like. I should just run with this idea and this theme. The first tune I wrote about him, Marion by Accident, the song is pretty much about like when we went to the doctors without him to see how we approached this. Like, it was me, my mom, and my sister, and how can we get him to the doctor, and he was still somewhat with it at this point, but he was still driving. That was like the scary part. So we had like a tracker on his phone, and he was trying to drive to Mattapoisett, you know, and we could see where he was going. He was trying to go to the golf course in Mattapoisett because he played golf his whole life. He had like a gift card. So we're watching him drive on the phone. We can see where he's going, and he's going like in circles. He doesn't know how to get where he's going. So it's like he kept going east, like he was like going towards Marion.
Oh,
And so that's why I came up with the lyric Marion by accident. He didn't really mean to go there. And then he figured I finally, got to where he was going. And but it's just tough. I know it seems like, everyone's starting to know somebody who has Alzheimer's or is dealing with it. It's becoming more and more. So from there, that's how like that song developed, and writing that tune. And I mean, it was a tough one to write because it was a very realistic thing. And
and
you
close
know
to home.
yeah, yep, absolutely.
Um, I want to acknowledge you, by the way, for the nearly 3 years of sobriety. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment when you decide to make a change like that. And also, I'm really excited to hear the record because it just what I'm hearing from you is so authentic and honest, and that's a scary place to go to. But I want to acknowledge you for being willing to go there and not flinch from it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
When will we actually hear the record?
Oh God. Oh, well, it's musically it's done. It's getting mixed right now at Bongo Beach Productions. I work with John Mayu there, and it's almost done mixing, and then of course the mastering, and then I just need to get it out there. I'm hoping maybe by the springtime, maybe March or April. That would be realistic. That way, I mean, I started recording last May. With my schedule, it's freaking crazy. I wish I could have got in there and done everything within the month, but just wasn't possible. It was lucky if I get to the studio 2 times a month.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not easy to get into a studio for an extended period under normal circumstances. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Who are you working with on the record?
As far as other musicians go,
Yeah.
yeah. So I have Tom O'Leary is the drummer, which I also play with. That's Molly's
Yep.
brother. He's like one of my best friends. He's an incredible drummer and great dude. I have 2 bass players on it. One is Rob Massoud, who I play with also with Jay. He's the bassist in Jay Kelley. And another bass player is my buddy Bill Ferry, which he lives in Nashville. So I actually sent him the tracks, and he did them just at his home in the studio, and he did it in Nashville and sent them back. So he's on a couple tracks. Rob's on a couple tracks, and Molly's on a couple tunes, singing backup as well. And also, there's one tune that has baritone sax. It's my buddy Marcus Montero. Have you heard of Marcus?
I have. He's excellent.
Yeah, Marcus is an amazing. I mean, all these guys are amazing musicians. And I met Marcus at UMass. So the days I was saying we were heavily into jazz and just practicing 8 to 10 hours a day. It was like Marcus was me and him kind of became good friends doing that because that's all we did. We just drank a bunch of coffee and play our instruments all day, all night, So he's on it. And of course, I said John Mayo. Mayo is he produced one of the producers and recorded it and all that, and he's great to work with.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear it, John. And I hope it can be out in that March-April timeframe. These are songs I'm sure you're playing out when you're at Poor Farm or Doko. How much are these songs a part of your set at this point?
I try to play them all. Yeah. Yeah, I would say most gigs I play them all, maybe give or take, but I try to play them as much as I can. Because I mean, the songs develop. I think that's how they develop is when you play them live. You can play them all you want at home or in the studio, but when you play them in front of an audience over and over and over again, that's when I think they kind of come into their own. And you might do it slightly different than how you did it in the studio or when you were rehearsing it. And I like that. That's why another reason to gig all the time is your sound's going to keep developing. That's the only way I think is to play live. That's how it happens.
Is it partly getting a sense of what the songs need when you're out playing? Is it also a sense of what people respond to?
Yeah, I look at that too. Like maybe one tune I wouldn't, as far as the originals, maybe one tune I wouldn't think they respond to, and then they actually did. Like there's one on that closes the album. When I first wrote it, I should tell the story behind it. So it's another one about my dad, and I should say, like, I guess he wrote half the tune. So when he was still alive, I'd hang out with him a lot. I'd try to see him as much as I could because I didn't know, how much time he had or how much he would remember us. So I was like trying to soak up every moment as far as being around him. And you could say I became closest with him these past 4 years than I ever have been. It's kind of a trip how that happened. But so one day I went over his house and I had my nylon string guitar, this one. So it's in open D tuning. So I gave it to him and I just told him to strum it. And when he strummed that chord, which is just an open D chord, he like lit up. His face just like exploded, you know. So he kept strumming it and strumming it, and I started kind of improvising, singing a melody over it, you know. And then there's not too many lyrics to it, just a simple like 2 3 chord song, which was some basic lyrics. And I was like, I got to record this. I was so like jazzed about it, and I was like, well, maybe this song kind of sounds maybe too mellow to play live. So to get back to your question, um, but when I played it live, like people seem to really like that one. Where my initial thought was, it's probably too mellow, and you know, it might put people to sleep. And when I play that one, a lot of people come up, especially like at a songwriter event. If I explain the story behind the tune, like I think out of all the tunes I play, a lot of people kind of respond to that one. So originally I thought, yeah, it's too mellow for live, and then it turns out where people seem to dig that one.
And they're also responding to the story, because that's the thing that struck me watching that Artist Corner segment was, you're not only a great musician and songwriter, but you know how to set the scene with telling the stories about the songs,
Yeah.
so that people get a little bit more context and a little bit more of the impact. Musically, what does the record sound like?
Oh man, I think it was a variety of stuff on there, which is good. I think it kind of captures everything I like to do. There's of course there's a lot of ambient kind of sounds, which I love, kind of the psychedelic ambient, washy sounds that's on there.
Yeah, the atmospheric stuff, there's a
Yes.
lot of your SoundCloud stuff. If you go to John's SoundCloud, it links from his website. There's a lot of very cool instrumental work, and some of it gets into that ambient kind of realm. I really love that.
Yeah, that's on there for sure. I mean, I wanted that to be on there, and I like always doing like some basic acoustic finger picking instrumentals. So there's a couple on there that I improvised, with that same guitar, that nylon string. I just did the open D tuning chord in. Um, and of course, I mean, I was like, there's got to be some heavy electric guitar solos in there. So there's some of that as well, you know. There's one tune where the ending, I had this idea for lots of vocals and female vocalists, but it never worked out with the timing as far as getting people in the studio. So I was like, what am I going to do with the end here? So instead of vocals, I overdubbed the electric guitar a bunch. So it's this huge, like it's just the electric guitar playing the chorus over and over and over, and it's stacked, with harmonies, but just all guitar. So I think I overdubbed. Oh my god, I don't even know. It might be like 8 to 10.
Wow.
Guitar. So it's this huge like guitar sound. So at first, what turned out, I was like almost thinking of scratching the track, because that song was cool up to that point, and I was like, oh, what, it needs something here. What am I going to do? And then that kind of happened in the studio in the moment, and it turned out like it's a kind of a cool part.
That's really amazing, because you had to improvise the solution. Like, you couldn't get a bunch of people into the studio.
Yeah.
Logistically, it's like, well, what am I going to do here? And so, it really sounds like you saved the track by just going, okay, let's try this with guitar instead of voices and see if I can make it fly.
Yeah. First I was like, I don't know what it's going to sound like. I love that way you kind of like, I don't know what's going to sound like. And then you work it out, and you're like, oh, it exceeds expectations. It's a cool process.
It also highlights how important improvisation is to you, because, improvisation keys songs. It might key, saving a song in the studio. It's something, I mean, a couple of cases, it sounds like, you improv tracks that ended up actually, they're going to be on the record.
Yeah.
So that takes you back to, that whole beginning of wanting to improvise. And it's just staggering I'm even more excited to hear it now than I was 15 minutes when we started talking about it.
That means a lot. Yeah. I guess that comes from the jazz, because for years I wanted to be like a jazz guitar player. When I was at UMass, but I mean, I haven't played jazz in the true sense of the word in so long. I don't even know I could probably get through a tune at this point. But I mean, I learned so much from studying that kind of music, and one of my favorite things is just to like pick up the guitar and just start playing. I try to do that every day, just not have a preconceived thought, and a lot of it can be just noodling and it's whatever, but sometimes something comes out of it. So a lot of like, as far as writing musical ideas, that it comes from that, just picking up the guitar and just stop playing. And if it's like, oh, that melody's cool, or that, you know, chord progression is cool, I try to record it immediately in the phone, you know.
When you record something like that, do you file it away, or do you like try and go back as soon as possible to work it out into something, more of a song or more of a full instrumental piece?
I'd love to say I go back and and work it out immediately, but I if I went in my phone right now, there's probably well over 100 ideas, maybe more than that, that maybe I haven't even listened to. So it's just like I have it and like whatever,
Yeah.
and then some days I'll go back and listen. Like I did maybe a few weeks ago, I listened to a couple ideas from like weeks ago, and what's cool about that is you're hearing it almost for the first time, like a listener would, because I just forgot what I did. So it could be like, hey, that's really cool. That could be something. Or hey, that's awful. Why do I even record it? So it can go either way. But I'll do that like we talk about the 5 minute writing thing, every exercise every day. We just free write. I've done that with the guitar where maybe you record for 1 minute, just improvise on the guitar and stop it, and then do it again. Maybe do it a few times. You do that every day for consecutive days. I mean, if you did that every day for 2 weeks, you have like well over an hour of material. I mean, that could essentially be an album. You have all these different ideas. If you sat there and worked every one of them out, whether they're good, bad, or mediocre, it could be a tune.
Let's talk about your other projects, because you play guitar with Molly O'Leary and you're also in the Kelley Band. Let's talk
Yep.
about Kelley Band because I'm not familiar with them. Can you
Okay.
tell me about the band?
Oh, I've been playing with Jay since 2016, maybe, but I've known Jay forever. Back when we were early 20s, we would do like gigs together, like the band I was in at the time. So I always knew him, and he needed a guitar player, and I think that was 2016. And he gave me all his tunes, and which he has a lot of. He's an amazing songwriter. You should check him out. He's got
I will.
so many songs. I mean, I don't even know how many albums he's got right now. I mean, we're in the process of recording another album. So I think full length albums he's got one, two, I think 5 or 6. This might be his sixth one, I think, but with a bunch of singles in there. So looking at him, like him and Molly, like they're such great songwriters. It's an influence on me as well to see how they work and see how they write tunes. Um, and he's a great band leader too. He knows what's good about him. He knows what he wants. So like if he has a new tune, he'll send me the track and he'll be like, "Yep, I want this distorted guitar, and think George Harrison meets David Gilmour."
Wow.
He has a clear vision all the time of what he wants for his music. Um, which is that's a good learning experience too. That's if you can have a clear idea of what you want, that'll limit studio time as well. But it's just fun playing with those guys. There's never been any drama. Like I said, Tommy's the drummer and Rob's the bass player. We show up, we play music, we laugh, and we just really mesh well together.
I was talking with Ryan Rooney a few weeks ago for this podcast, and he said, as I get older, sorry, something just cracked. As I get older, something just tells me I want to be hanging out with people that I like when I'm playing music. Rather, it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the best musician.
Yep.
It's who's got the right disposition for what we want to do.
No, that's a great point. Exactly.
And Molly, how did you start working with her?
So with Molly, she obviously me and Tommy are good friends. That's her brother. So I think she needed, for her album Holding Space. She wanted a guitar player, so I didn't know she wanted me on the album. So she asked Tom if I would do it, and then he's like, I don't know, just see if he'll do it. And she called me or texted me, I don't remember, and yeah, it was all about it. I was just like, send me. I didn't really hear her music at this point either, but I was just like, okay, like I was ready for another project, something different. And I heard all the tunes, all the demos. She sent me everything. It was like the most thorough thing I've ever seen from a musician. Like all the tunes, all the lyrics, everything was just like this nice format of what she had. So I started listening to the tunes and sitting down with them and being like, all right, well, how can I like bring these songs to life while kind of like playing how I like to play, but without getting in the way of anything she's trying to do. I just wanted to like kind of paint around her tunes and color them up. I mean, she was looking for kind of an atmospheric kind of sound too, or that kind of ambient sound on some of the tunes as well. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened.
And now you guys are prepping for her second record, which, if I remember correctly, you're going down to Nashville with her to record in February. How's progress going on that?
Good. We've been rehearsing. We've already rehearsed a few times, and same deal like she did with the last one. Very thorough. All the tunes are recorded, all the lyrics, explains what the songs are about. So I listened to all of them, and again, I try to think of what the songs need. I'll try to come up with more ideas than less. Even if I'm not too jazzed about the idea, maybe she will. I think it's good to have a fair amount of things of what you want to play. But I think this will have 10 songs, and she might have 17 or 18. So we got to
Always
narrow
good to
it.
have more.
Oh yeah, she's a writing machine. She cranks them out, and it's tough. It'll be tough to pick the 10, because some will get left off that are probably worthy of being there.
Yeah.
So
and are the 10 being picked ahead of time before recording? I mean, I imagine with a limited time and budget, you're not going to record 18 songs.
Yeah. I think we got to narrow it down to like 12 or 13. That way, then you pick the best 10. There's some that'll be definite for sure. There's some that we play live now that are like really fun to play. That's like, yeah, that's a no brainer. That's going to be on the album, So that's we've rehearsed like 3 times, and we just rehearse 4 or 5 hours at a time and just keep going over stuff. And I might have her for my own sake just play the tune over and over, and I keep trying to come up with ideas.
When do you guys head down to Nashville?
It'll be in February, during the school vacation week.
Yeah.
So I think, and we record Monday to Monday or something like that. I think it's just 7 days straight of being in the studio.
And is there, at this point, is it a lot of like pre-production, getting parts down, and who else is coming down with you? I meant to ask.
I believe I'm not sure. I think it's me and Molly, and
is it her bassist too? I could have sworn.
Well, as far as other instruments, I think they're going to use some other studio people down there. So I'm not sure exactly who.
Yeah.
But I guess we'll find out when we get there. And Will Hogue is the producer, so that's a trip. The whole thing's a trip.
That sounds really exciting. So you're involved in 3 records, one that's wrapped up, but 2 in progress, and it's just, man, you are just super busy and doing a lot of exciting things too.
Yeah.
John, is there anything you'd like to talk about that we haven't touched on yet?
Trying to think. No, I think we covered it. Yeah.
All right.
I guess I should say I teach at Double Bar Music too. I teach guitar as well.
Oh yeah. How long have you been teaching?
Oh man, 22 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. And,
Yeah.
what's your teaching approach?
It's different than what it used to be. I mean, now I teach. Um, if someone comes to me, if they already can play, they usually have an idea of what they want. So I'll take that and run with it. I mean, if someone's a beginner, obviously I just give them kind of the basics. And then once they start coming into their own and playing a little bit, I try to gravitate towards what their strong points are. So if a student is getting good at strumming some chords and all that, I'll try to get them to, even if they don't want to sing, I'll try to get them to sing. And because that's like kind of how for me it was. It's now that singing a bit, and it's like very freeing. So I try to do that. But then I doesn't matter what level they're at. I'm always trying to get them to write their own music. Doesn't whether it's one chord, two notes, three notes, 17 chords, 8 verses. I think I can just see it in a student's face when they come in and they're like, "Oh, I made this." That you can see that they just light up with joy, and I think it inspires them maybe to keep going.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm in my 50s now, and anytime I come up with something I really like, I light up like that. You're never too old to get excited about what you're doing and what you've created.
Yep.
All right, let me hit you with a few final questions I like to ask everyone. What is your first musical memory?
I guess it's with my dad, him coming home and playing his records. And I mean, that was the first time I saw, so you could just see the joy he had in listening, especially the beat. I mean, his favorite band was the Beatles. So he knew all the words. He would just get so gassed about it. Like just, he gets so excited about, well, what do they mean with this lyric? And what does he talk mean, Mr. Mustard? And he would, he was just so, you could see the excitement, and that was very nice. That I don't even know how old I was, maybe 3 or 4 when he was,
Wow.
as far as I can remember it, and it's cool. I have all those records. I'm looking to my left right now. They're all sitting right there. It's, it's cool to have all that stuff that he used to cherish so much.
Yeah, it's not just music, it's memories.
Yeah. Yep.
What is one record that you would want to have on a desert island?
Oh my God. Well, I'd have to. It started all with "Dark Side of the Moon" by Pink Floyd. It'd have to, and if it's going to end that way, if I'm going to die out there, it's. I guess it's going to end that way with that. I mean, it could be any Floyd album. That's my favorite all-time band. I guess it would be that one.
Who's a super sneaky secret influence? Somebody that if they heard you playing or heard your songs, it would be somebody they wouldn't think of as an obvious influence.
I'm a huge fan of 90s hip hop.
Wow.
Because I grew up with that. I love Wu-Tang. I love Pete Rock, CL Smooth, Mos Def. Yeah, I still listen to that all the time. Like especially Wu-Tang. I don't know. To me, they're like the Beatles of hip hop. And when they first came out, it was like, well, who's your favorite member? Like, but just how their lyrics flow, their writing, their performance of it all, and of course the RZA, he's the mastermind behind all their music, and I just love like listening to him in interviews talk about his process and how he writes and how he comes up with musical ideas. So I mean, sometimes that's the one that came to my mind, because sometimes I'll tell people and they're like, "Oh, really?" Like, "Oh yeah," like it's in the mix, it's in the rotation on Spotify all the time, and I love it. I go back and listen to those albums all the time.
Awesome. Who's one musician, living or dead, you'd want in your band?
Man, I get this. Everyone gets this question, I guess, once in a while, and I think it always changes for me. I think it'd be cool to play guitar for Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would just be fun, and to try to play guitar, like to back up a singer, like a front man like that, like he was one of the best shows I've ever seen. I saw him solo, and I was just it was one of those performances where you go in and you're like, yeah, this is going to be good. But you came out like, that was beyond good. Like
Right.
it was so I think it'd be cool to sit down with him and, do some shows and just talk about music and life with him. I feel like he would have a good perspective on all that.
Last question. What is your South Coast happy place?
No, man. I don't know. Maybe eating at Antonio's.
That works.
Yeah. So like I don't go too often, but it's like when it comes up, it's like, yeah, all right, we're just gonna have a good meal and be around friends and laugh and have a good time. I always like that. Any restaurant, really, if you're around people you love to be around with, that's like a good break and a breath from everything, from the everyday mundane.
That's the good stuff.
Yeah.
John, thank you so much. It's been great talking with you. I mean, 3 records coming out in the next few months. Your own, which I'm super excited about. Molly's, which you're going to go down and record in February, and then J. Kelley you're working on right now. I'm excited to hear everything you do. And folks, do check out John's website, johnfernandesmusic.com, because he's got a whole slew of recurring shows at the Poor Farm and Doco and other places. So be sure to check him out. He's just amazing. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you much, Scott. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us for another In Focus podcast, which is generously sponsored in part by Heavenly Spirits Importers and funded in part with grants from the New Bedford Cultural Council and the Fairhaven Cultural Council, local agencies supported by the Mass Cultural Council, a state agency. I'm Scott Bishop, and thanks for listening to the Artists Index.